Welcome to Travel Vein. Now, we won't say which state this is in, but there's been unsolved murders, people disappearing. When they do find them, pretty gruesome in how they were murdered.
So you got to realize this is post to 9/11, 2001. So we had the Afghanistan War.
Well, by now, 2002 and later.
Right. We had the Afghanistan War. 2003, we had the Iraq War. So we had two war fronts going on. So all the news was taken up with the Iraq-Afghanistan War, the war on terror. You had a lot of unsolved crimes going on that didn't really make the press. Unsolved murders, was there a serial killer going around? A lot of stuff the publicity or the media did not report on because it wasn't big business. It wasn't good for business. The Iraq-Afghanistan war was.
Right, and we both been involved in newspaper stuff, so the war would have got front page news. This story probably would have been a small section and somewhere in the middle or back section of the paper.
It would have been a small news outlet like the local, like rinky-dink town, but not like New York Times, not like CNN or Fox.
Murders are still unsolved to this day, right?
Oh, God, yes. The theory is serial killer. Well, if you believe in werewolves, I guess that is true.
Yeah, and it would be vicious. And continuing with the story, and that's what we bring this up because, again, this is unsolved. Don't know, at this moment, they're not sure. The game warden, or not the game warden, the Bigfoot guys mentioned a werewolf, a possible werewolf. As crazy as it sounds, but as we continue this story, it might not sound so crazy.
Let me let the viewers in. Our friend who's Special Forces, Jeremiah, he came across this. All right? Something he should not have seen. I don't ask him questions. He's not going to tell us. He just tells us a story. Like we're all hunting, playing cards. He was like, let me tell you this story. And Richie, our officer buddy in the military, kind of like, I've heard of this through Stan and Anthony. For those of y'all that know who Stan and Anthony is, they're also Special Forces buddies that are friends with Richie and Jeremiah. And they've been hunting with us, and they're like, oh yeah, we've heard of this story. And it's hush-hush. Certain governors, like, we got to keep this under wraps.
When the strangest of strangest things, the only way I can word it, I guess, there's always a full moon.
2 days, 3 days before a full moon, 2-3 days after a full moon. You have the full, it's a moon cycle, moon stages. At the fullest of the moon, weird shit would happen. 2 days or 3 days prior, where it's not a full moon, but it looks like a full moon, and after, weird things would happen. But at the fullest of moon, crazy stuff would happen in this family.
Right. And let's tell them what some of the crazy things that would happen.
Well, you're on a farm. You have predators that, always go around farms. But things would happen that you couldn't account of an actual wolf, a bear, a raccoon, a possum, a stray dog, a coyote. These people, this family, would hear wolf howlings. And yeah, there are wolves that run across North America, but these were eerie howlings as if like somebody is playing on an intercom a howling through a movie. Eerie. And that they're dogs, and they had 3 Alaskan Malamutes, big, giant Alaskan Malamutes, that would not be their personality, that would always be alert, that would always whimper, sound like they were in distress, or they would howl or growl during these stages of the moon.
Tell the viewers what happened to the cow.
Which one?
Take one. Weird things happen on the full moon.
So they first started with 1 cow, then they moved to 2. There was 4 cows. They had no bulls. They had cows for milking. They found 1 cow 100 yards past the creek that was probably 50 yards from their barn, brutally slaughtered, drained of his blood, just ripped and torn to shreds of a huge predator with claws. And it was ripped and torn to shreds, as in flung in trees, bushes, branches, scattered around a 25-yard radius.
Now, did the game warden or the sheriff come out and see that?
All of them did. The Bigfoot guy, the game warden, and the sheriff, and they're all looking out puzzled. And they were all looking at the Bigfoot researcher. And the Bigfoot researcher's like, listen, it's known that Bigfoots take animals. But there's two things that they do. They always leave, or not always, but most of the time they'll leave a gift. They'll leave a footprint, they'll leave a trail, but you'll never find the carcass.
I was just going to say, if you've heard some of our other stories, you'll have heard some of the gifts they've left behind, the Bigfoots have left behind, and some of the other stories, so if you want to check those out. But also, there was, I don't know if it was a cow they took, but something broke the fence.
So they had reinforced, I don't know what the fencing that farmers used, but this is reinforced fencing, and you know, they had a lot of animals disappear. They didn't know if it was human, what predator it was. They didn't know. So they left, like, I don't know how the husband, he got concertina wire. And for those of viewers that don't know, that's like what they use in prisons, military camps, that if you go over it, you're going to get slashed and cut pretty good.
A version of the barbed wire, right?
It's razor wire.
But it's razor wire. But it's if you've seen barbed wire, you'll have an idea. But if you've ever seen the TV shows where they show the wraparound wire, and it literally does look like it has razor blades on it, the straight.
Any human sees that, it's going to be like, stay away, don't, steal whatever's on the other side. This was destroyed. And behind the barn, they had this big, huge oak tree. And from the oak tree, from the back of the barn, was a 10-foot gap. They had double concertina wire wrapped around it. That was totally demolished, along with the fencing. It was like some person that was on drugs or messed up just totally demolished, ripping the barbed wire, the fencing, and the concertina wire off of the oak tree and the barn. And 2 of the 4 cows went missing, and they found one of the cows totally just demolished. Like, I won't say zombies, but it was just like ripped and torn to shreds. No meat was eaten, but it was clawed, slashed, and it was like a blood frenzy. Not for the organs, not for the meat. It was just a blood frenzy. It was crazy. Like, the cow exploded from the inside because there was entrails and blood and guts all over the tree branches, the bushes, dragged, but there was claw marks. And you can see embedding of footprints, but you couldn't distinguish what kind of footprints. You just saw impressions. And when the Bigfoot guy got out there, he's like, this is not a Bigfoot. It looked like something would jump and hop. Bigfoots have a human-like footprint, human-like stride, but bigger. This thing looked like it would have the same thing, but it would jump like a canine would. That would jump and tack. You'd have a 6-foot stride or a 4-foot stride, then you'd have a 12-foot stride as if it jumped. It was just, it had the sheriff, the game warden, and the Bigfoot guy totally puzzled what it was.
And it was another full moon.
This was in the 6th-stage full moon of the full moon. So let's say the full moon was on a Thursday. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, it would look like a full moon, but you see like a percentage of the moon missing, and afterwards it would be in a 10-day span of a full moon stage.
And then on another full moon, what happens to the dog?
I don't know when this happened, but the family would have 2 older daughters and a youngest son, ranged from like 12 to 17. Each one of them had a dog, Alaskan Malamute. The son, somehow the female bonded with the son, and the female and the older male had litters. And one of the sisters had the male, and the other sister would have the youngest pup of the litter, which was another male. And he was within a year old, but he was getting fully developed. During one of the full moons, the male dog, the young pup, 9 to 12 months, went missing. The kids were home alone. The parents were out on the night on the town to themselves, and the oldest daughter was the babysitter. They would hear howlings, and the kids would look out the windows, open the front door to see what was going on. Well, one of the sisters opened the front door because they would hear weird noises, like something's walking around the house. The young pup would growl and they would bark. Well, when she went to go open the front door, that young pup male would run out the door, never be seen alive again. Parents came home, and I don't know what the pup's name was, but it's like the pup got out. She was upset, and I think it was the oldest daughter that it was her pup. And we're not talking a little puppy, but it was a young. It was like 9 months to 16 months in that age.
Yeah, so it's no longer a little pup; it was a dog.
And the father and the son went out looking for it, couldn't find it. And it was when a couple of goats went missing, and they found one of the goats completely slaughtered. Like the cow, they came across the pup, and it was slaughtered just like the cow and the goat. But what was weird about this was it was something that came up and gathered the remains of this pup and kind of left it in a respectful kind of a way. It was weird. And again, the father called the game warden out, the Bigfoot researcher, but the sheriff didn't get called out. And came out, and the Bigfoot researcher guy was like, this is odd. I mean, game warden and the father's like, what do you mean? It's like, well, whatever killed the goat and whatever slaughtered the cow killed this Malamute. But something else came up and gathered all the remains of it and was paying respect, kind of like for you all. And the father was like, what do you mean? It's like, well, whatever killed this, something was watching it kill this and gathered the remains of this, knowing that you all would come out and find it, and was paying respects for you all so you all could take the full remains of this puppy back to you all. Like limbs of, the hind legs, the front legs, the head, its entrails, everything.
Now, this is the Bigfoot guy saying.
The Bigfoot guy was saying this.
But he's not telling them there may be a Bigfoot.
They're asking the Bigfoot guy, how do you know that it's not the same thing slaughtered? And this is where it freaked out the game warden and the father and son. Because this is over a 2-3 year span.
Was the sheriff there at this point?
The sheriff was not there at this point. And the viewers have to realize weird things were happening. The sheriff, because he's friends with the wife, he would have deputies that would occasionally, off duty, would show up and just stay in the driveway, in the vehicle, walk around the premises of the property on their own time for anywhere from 4 to 6 hours. And there was a rookie that's involved in this, a guy that's been on the force for even less than a year.
Now, if I remember right, when they first moved out there, they weren't even locking the doors because they were out in the middle of nowheres. But when all these weird things started happening, they started locking their doors.
This is the part of the country where people leave their keys in their ignition in their vehicles, leave their front doors unlocked. These people are well off. their property joined her family's property where she grew up at, and these people probably owned 100, 200 acres out in the woods. The nearest town's probably 25 miles away. And their nearest neighbor, other than her family, is probably 12 miles down the road. For their driveway's long. Their driveway's probably 2 miles to the blacktop. From the blacktop from their property, probably 8, 10 miles to their nearest neighbor. And the nearest gas station is probably 8 miles away.
Right, and then go back to we got off track there just a little bit, but we're setting the stage for everything. Everything we're telling you, we're setting up for everything. So the Bigfoot guys out there, they're asking him like, well, how do you know, it's not the same animal or whatnot like that? So he's looking at one track.
So the game warden and the father's like looking at this guy like he's lost his marbles. He goes, I know I sound crazy. And where they found the dog at was in the creek bed. All right. A lot of mud, still creek, a lot of mud, embankments probably 2-3 feet high. It's probably 10 yards from where they found the slaughter of the cow months previously, where the son found the slaughter of the goat weeks previously. And the game warden's like, how do you know this isn't the same thing? He goes, because I'm a Bigfoot guy. And you all laughed at me, and you even agreed that this is a canine footprint. We don't know what it is. We know it's bipedal. And he's like, well, how do you know it's not a canine? He goes, because I'm the Bigfoot guy. And I believe this is a Bigfoot that has gathered the remains of your all's dog, because Bigfoots are curious to family, especially children and women. And it's like, how do you know that this is a Bigfoot? He goes, because he's pointing over, that's a Bigfoot footprint. And sure enough, down in this mud is a human-like huge footprint that is not like the previous footprints that they've been seeing throughout their property that are canine-like that have claws. He goes, that's a Bigfoot footprint. And the father, the son, and the game warden are looking at it like, oh, damn. It's a clear, obviously bare footprint, bipedal, but huge. And Jeremiah gave us stats. It was like a 21-inch footprint, like 9 inches wide.
So we're dealing with Bigfoots and werewolves.
I know this sounds crazy, all right? And the viewers are going to call BS on this, but there is 2 different bipedal footprints here. One is an obvious Bigfoot print. The other one is a canine bipedal human-like footprint with huge, deep claws that don't mimic a Bigfoot footprint. Call it what you want. There is a Bigfoot bipedal footprint, and then there is a canine bipedal footprint with claws that, for these people that believe in werewolves or watch werewolf movies, this fits the description. And the game warden even says these aren't wolf footprints because they're bipedal. There's not 4. They don't have the pads of a wolf, but they have the pads of, I hate to say it, what you would see in Hollywood as a werewolf footprint.
So this is building up for what I'm going to call the night of terror, because something happens and we're about ready to dive into that portion of the story, because we've built it up to the point, yes, strange things happen in the full moon, those days revolving around the full moon. And I believe this night of terror that I'm talking about may have even been, the brightest of the full moons?
When all hell breaks loose.
It's one way of putting it.
Is within a week. All right, again, let's say a full moon happened on a Saturday. And this is towards the fall. All right, upstate or up in the northeastern part of the United States in the fall. Cold, snow, all right, in the fall. 2-3 days before the full moon, weird things were happening. That the sheriff would leave deputies on the clock on this property. Even he had friends within, I don't know what the state would call it, if it's the highway patrol or the state police or state troopers, I don't know, but they would leave their version of state troopers of like, hey, listen to the sheriff, like we'll say the sheriff was Sheriff Bailey. All right, we'll just say he's known as Sheriff Bailey. Would like, hey, could y'all stay an hour or two here, allow my deputies to go, give them a break, and when y'all leave, they would, keep watch. There were even state troopers that were on this property because you had the murders going around that were unsolved. This family would have weird things happening, claw marks. They were in a hot zone of something. All right. And everything was logged that you can't find to this day. Like the logs of these state troopers and these deputies don't exist, and they don't even talk like this never happened, even the game warden.
Right, so what happens on the Night of Terror?
Not documented. It was documented, but it's vanished like a fart in the wind. Like, as in, a governor got into, it's like, you don't talk about this. And everything that Jeremiah talks about has been redacted in the sense of, he saw it, and now it doesn't exist anymore. And if you know this state, weird things happen in that triangle area of missing people, never been found, unsolved murders, and it's some weird stuff. And it all happens on this property of this family. And it's, I guess, I wouldn't say a night of terrors, but I guess a night of strange, bizarre things that would lead to a terror. And it's, at the time, it's not funny, but what happens to the young rookie deputy is pretty funny.